2446 and hashtag Limpopo Traffic.
This lesson is proudly brought to you by Kagiso Trust in partnership with the Limpopo Department of Education and Capricorn FM. Kagiso Trust, overcoming poverty.
All right, it's 6 minutes after 5. It's Capricorn FM, Limpopo's hottest frequency, the pioneers of progress. Speaking of progress, that's what we're about to get into right now. Catch-up lesson, of course, hashtag Kagiso radio teacher. And today we are joined in studio by Mr. Magia. And today we're focusing on life sciences term 1. And the topic will be DNA code of life. Nucleic acids, protein synthesis, and replication. So before we, no, I told you I got this. But before okay, is it in a nutshell? Very summarize reproduction.
In reproduction,
yeah.
No, reproduction. I'm still going to present it the next lesson.
So,
but this one is just the DNA, the code of life.
Okay.
This one, the entire show, he's been sure this is reproduction.
DNA code of life. Come on now.
No, it's still coming.
It's still coming.
Part is still
but are you good, sir?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. And yourself?
All right. No, we are good. Thank you so much for coming through. The floor is yours.
No, thanks very much. Good afternoon, my lovely students. I'm Mr. Magia SR, attached to Texila Secondary School. Like they've already indicated, today I'm going to present the Term 1 work, which is based on DNA, which is the code of life, and it is worth 27 marks. Then during the course of the show, you may also make it a point that you write the following, or you send your message, the WhatsApp message, to 082 654 2446. Let me repeat, I said 082 654 2446. Thank you. But if you are not going to be able to send the message, I'm also going to make it a point that towards the end, I'm going to coin a lot of questions. I know different types of questions that are based on the topic that I'm going to present. The topic, like it has been indicated, we said is nucleic acids, protein synthesis, and DNA replication. What are nucleic acids? Let me start by outlining two aspects that are based on nucleic acids. We've got the DNA, and the other one is RNA. Remember, DNA is an abbreviation, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acids, and then RNA stands for ribose nucleic acid. Now, the most other thing that we're supposed to take into cognizance is that you must know that we've got different types of DNA. We also have different types of RNA. With regard to RNA, I'm sure when we were still young, we used to watch a certain movie by the A-Team. It was also, there was a certain guy by the name of Mr. T. So you may write this formula down, Mr. T. Then from there, this Mr. T stands for, the first M is going to be M, and then from there you're going to write RNA. In other words, that is the first one, messenger RNA. Then R stands for rRNA, which is ribosomal RNA. And then T is going to be T for transfer RNA. And then with regard to types of DNA, we've got the mitochondrial DNA. We also have the chloroplastic DNA and also the nuclear DNA. So that's the first point that you are supposed to take into cognizance. And then the other point that I want to bring forth is that, or let me just simplify it like this. Wherever you are, make it a point that you have the pen and paper, and then you may divide your script or your page into two. On the left-hand side, just write the following. Just write DNA, and then after writing DNA, draw a line moving downwards and write nucleotide, and then also draw a line moving downwards, write P, and then draw a line again moving downwards from that P, and then write S, and then in front of that S, just draw a line moving towards the right-hand side now, and then write NB. In other words, you're having DNA, from there nucleotide, then phosphate, sugar, then dash towards the right-hand side, you write NB, and then that NB stands for the nitrogen bases. I'm sure you know that under DNA we've got 4 nitrogenous bases, namely adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. And it's abbreviated as ATCG. In other words, A always pairs with T, and then C always paired with G. And then from there, remember that P stands for phosphate group. P stands for phosphate. And then that S, we said, stands for sugar. But in brackets, make it a point that you write deoxyribose sugar, because if you just write sugar, you are not going to get anything. We're going to put 0 at the end of the year. Why? Because you must be able to explain us whether maybe it's for DNA or RNA. And if it is for DNA, you're supposed to write deoxyribose sugar. And then if it is for RNA, you're supposed to write ribose sugar. Then from there, on the right-hand side, also write RNA. Remember, I said on the left-hand side, we start with DNA. Then on the right-hand side, start with RNA. And then draw a line moving downwards again, write nucleotide. And then another line again moving downwards, write P for phosphate. And then write another line moving downwards again, write S, but in brackets, write ribose sugar. And then draw a line moving towards the right-hand side, then write NB. Remember I said NB stands for nitrogen base. And then also write the following nitrogen bases. Just write A for adenine, and then U for uracil, and then C for cytosine, and then G for guanine. So now, let me coin questions based on what I've just presented. Number 1, examiner may end up saying, I normally tell my learners that 7 plus 3 is equals to 10, 9 plus 1 is equals to 10, 5 plus 5 is equals to 10. What we are teaching is this 10, but questions are set in different ways. So now, I'm going to show you from the lesson that I've just outlined or presented, to show you how questions are going to be asked based on this one. Number 1, examiner may end up saying, what are the building blocks of DNA? Remember, you are going to say nucleotide. Or what are the monomers of DNA? You simply say nucleotide. Or what are the building units of DNA? Still nucleotide. Or examiner may end up saying, what are the building blocks of RNA? Remember, I was talking about DNA. Then RNA still is nucleotide. Or the monomers of RNA, nucleotide, the building blocks of RNA, nucleotides. Or examiner may end up saying, what are the building blocks of nucleic acids now? Remember, DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acids, and the RNA stands for ribose nucleic acid. So, to a certain extent, the examiner may end up saying, what are the building blocks of nucleic acids? Please don't forget, it's still the same answer, which is nucleotide. And then the other thing, maybe starting it from downwards, upwards now. Remember, I said below nucleotide, we've got phosphate, we've got sugar, we've got NB, which is the nitrogen base. So examiner may end up saying, what is the collective name of phosphate, sugar, and nitrogen base? And again, you are just going to say nucleotide. So now, then from here again, I'm going to check a certain question from a particular question paper. It was set in, it was 2018. It was the 2018 November question paper. Examiner said, describe the structure of RNA in a cell and involvement of the different types of RNA in protein synthesis. Although I'm still going to discuss something about protein synthesis, but just here, describe the structure of RNA in a cell and the involvement of different types of RNA in protein synthesis. I'm just outlining this. I'm still going to discuss a lot of things based on this one. I wanted to show you how questions can be asked. From here, remember I discussed the structure of the RNA. I'm going to guide you on how to deal with it. But the other thing that we're supposed to take into cognizance is, let me say, examiner says, obviously it's not going to say name 3 types of DNA with regard to types of DNA. It's not going to say name 3 types of DNA. There are different ways in which this type of question can be asked. Let me give you an example, like from the trial exam paper 2016, question 2.2.5. Examiner said, name 2 places in an animal cell where DNA can be located. Name 2 places in an animal cell where DNA can be located. Remember, I said we've got 3 types of DNA. I'm going to show you how this question is supposed to be answered. Number 1, we said we've got chloroplastic DNA. We've got nuclear DNA. We also have mitochondrial DNA. And then chloroplastic, obviously because of chloroplast. I'm sure you still remember last year in grade 11, you discussed something about the photosynthesis, the process of photosynthesis. And then we talked about chloroplast. And then even in grade 10, you know that chloroplast is from a plant cell, not animal cell. But now look at what's happening. Remember, when you talk about mitochondrial DNA, that's the DNA that is found in the mitochondrion. And nuclear DNA, the DNA that's found inside the nucleus. So we put aside the chloroplastic DNA. Then we're going to check something with regard to this type of question. Because examiner says, name 2 places in an animal cell where DNA can be located. Obviously, it's going to be mitochondrion and nucleus. You cannot talk about chloroplast because the question says in an animal cell. Now, I just wanted to show you how questions can be asked based on this one. And then now, let us get into serious business. Let us check something here. Write down the following. Just write DNA, and then we are going to build our DNA. Remember we said we've got DNA, nucleotide, phosphate, sugar, and nitrogen bases. But now I want us to check something here. Just write DNA. We are going to build our structure of the DNA. And then write PS. You write P, and then you draw a line downwards, you write S. And then another line moving towards the right-hand side, you write A. It's like an L, P, S, A. And then the other one, just write down there, you are going to write PST. You are going to use the same strategy or the same way that I have just outlined. And then you also write PSC. You also write PSG. Remember I said P, you draw a line moving downwards, you write S. You draw a line towards the right-hand side from S, then you write G. Now, if you check your statement or your diagram now, you have got PSA, PST, PSC, and then PSG. Then on the right-hand side, remember when you talk about DNA, it is double helix or the double-stranded. And then on the right-hand side, and our formula with regard to nitrogen basis is ATCG. A always pairs with T, and then C always pairs with G. Now that we have returned the following, let me check something here. Now that we have got A, PSA, that's the first one, PSA, what do you think you're supposed to write on the right-hand side? Remember I said we are using our formula ATCG. So it's true that we are going to write T on the right-hand side. And then down there we've got T. Then you are going to write A on the right-hand side. And then we also have PSC. Then on the right-hand side, you are going to write G. And then down there, we've got PSG. On the right-hand side, you are going to write C. So remember, that C is going to be linked to S. You write S. And then that S is linked to phosphate. That G, starting from downwards, is linked to S again. That S is linked to P. That A again is linked to S, and then S linked to P. Then the T is linked to S, and then S linked to P now. We have got the whole structure of the DNA now. But now there are some questions that are going to be asked based on this. Remember I said A always pairs with T, and then C with G. Examiner may end up saying adenine, which is A for adenine, or the percentage of adenine is 15%. What is the percentage of guanine? The percentage of adenine is 15%. What is the percentage of guanine? This type of question is always set, and then normally it is worth 2 marks. So how are you going to arrive at the correct answer? Remember I said A always pairs with T. If A is 15, just write ATCG. Then just next to A, write 15, because this is the one that we are given. They're saying A is 15%. Then you write A, you write 15, meaning that T also is going to be 15, meaning that we have got 15 plus 15, which is 30. And then you minus that 30 from 100, then the answer is going to be 70. So in other words, CG or C and G, they're going to share that 70. So in other words, that 70 is going to be divided by 2. We end up having 35. So in other words, A is going to be 15, T is 15, then it's equals to 30, and then C is equals to 35, and then G 35, and then 35 plus 35 is 70, and then when we add 70 to 30 is equals to 100. This is how we are going to approach this type of question. But now sometimes you are also going to be requested to tabulate the difference between DNA and RNA. Now, the fact that we have already drawn the structure, you have drawn the structure of the DNA, you can also draw the structure of the RNA, so that we refer from this. We don't want you to cram life sciences. We want you to in fact, to a certain extent, you are going to give me answers. I'm just going to ask you questions, and although theoretically, I know you are far away from me, but I know I'm going to guide you accordingly. Now, with RNA, just write PS. You write P, you move downwards, and then you write S. Then the arrow from S towards the right-hand side, you write A. And then you also write PSU. And then you also write PSC. And then you also write PSG. Now, if you check the structure, when we tabulate the difference, maybe if your examiner says tabulate the difference between DNA, DNA and RNA, number one, when you check the two structures, if you check the DNA, you'll realize that it is double-stranded. So, in fact, we may even start with the name of DNA, because DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, whereas RNA stands for ribose nucleic acid. And remember, the simplest thing that we can do is to say DNA, it has deoxyribose sugar for deoxyribonucleic acid, deoxyribose sugar, and then RNA, you are going to say it has the ribose sugar. Number two, when you check the two structures, you will realize that the DNA is double-stranded, whereas the RNA is single-stranded. And then on that note again, you can also realize that the bases under the DNA, they are paired, whereas under the RNA, bases are not paired. And then DNA is double helix, whereas RNA has got straight chain. And then DNA has got thiamine as one of the nitrogen bases, whereas when you check here from the structure of RNA, we've got uracil as one of the nitrogen bases. And then now, if examiner says, we're dealing with protein synthesis now, if examiner says, I'm going to give you a question now, and with protein synthesis, number one, the first thing that we're supposed to do, just know that protein is built up of amino acids. The building blocks of protein are amino acids. So in other words, from the old part of protein synthesis, we're going to talk about amino acids. And then the other point that I want you to write down, just write transcription, and then dash on the right-hand side, write nucleus. And then from there, below transcription, write translation, and then put dash on the right-hand side, write ribosome. If you have this, obviously you have got answers. The only thing that you are supposed to wait for is the examiner to ask you questions based on this one. Number one, let me ask you questions based on this. Examiner may end up saying, maybe just above transcription, write part of protein synthesis. Part of protein synthesis. And then on the right-hand side, just above nucleus, write cell organelles. Cell organelles. Look at what examiner is going to do. He may end up saying the part of protein synthesis that takes place inside the nucleus. Already on the left-hand side, we've got transcription. Or the part of protein synthesis that takes place on the ribosome, you will know that that is translation. Or examiner may end up saying, in which cell organelle does transcription take place? You must know that that is the nucleus. Or in which cell organelle does translation take place? The ribosome. There's not even a single way that these questions are not going to be set. Obviously, when we talk about protein synthesis, obviously, these are the type of questions that are going to be set. And then the other thing that I want you to know, because I'm still going to explain everything based on transcription and also translation. But the other thing that I want you to take into cognizance is that it's a particular question, maybe like indicated, is based on 2018. Question B, it says, describe the structure of RNA in a cell and the involvement of different types of RNA in protein synthesis. Remember, different types of RNA, I said we've got Mr. T, that is messenger RNA, ribosomal RNA, and transfer RNA. But the only two types of RNA that are going to play a role here are only tRNA, mRNA, and tRNA. And then from there, the other thing that I want to bring forth before we dwell much on the whole part is that you need to know the following. Remember, the question says the involvement of different types of RNA in protein synthesis. So make sure that because not long we'll be going for the news, and then from there, after that, I'm still going to explain almost everything. But the most important thing that I want to bring forth is that at least you must have this in your mind. Then, thank you.
All right. We'll be back with Mr. Magia more on Life Sciences Term 1 topic. It's 27 after 5. We are going to be getting into your news headlines with Nhlamulo Marule. We'll also be getting into your full sports bulletin.
Capricorn FM has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving you news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that isn't harmful and doesn't amount to hate speech. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa, P.O. Box 412365, Craig Hall 2024. That's the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa, P.O. Box 412365, Craig Hall 2024. Or send a fax to 011 325 5736 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit bccsa.co.za.
Reach your levels with us, Capricorn FM. These are radio goals. We them boys. This is no ordinary radio. Capricorn FM. The ultimate radio experience on Limpopo's hottest frequency. Capricorn FM.
Unstoppable. Uncontainable.
Give it up for
Limpopo's hottest frequency.
Capricorn FM, your number when to send me.
Limpopo's hottest frequency.
News headlines on Capricorn FM.
In our headlines, President Cyril Ramaphosa says South Africans need to remember that the country is not stuck in level 4 lockdown. New regulations published by the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition this afternoon to allow online shops in South Africa to sell anything other than alcohol and tobacco products have been gazetted. And the Congress of South African Trade Unions says it is happy with the news that some parts of the country will be moving to level 3 lockdown, but warns that businesses need to prioritize job security. Your final bulletin at 6 p.m.
Capricorn FM Sports. On and off the field. We've got you covered.
Kansela Spanish just drive kasi gimatasha mtlango eka siku ra namuntlha ku langutisa leswi landzelaka. Former Kaizer Chiefs and Mamelodi Sundowns David Kenmeyer has been relieved of his duties as a coach of Nova National Football Club in the Western Cape SAB League. Kenmeyer has been coaching at the Mother City outfit along with Zayn Alexander, who has been his assistant, but the club has confirmed making changes to the technical team. Kenmeyer and Alexander's departures have been confirmed in the club's official statement, adding that as a result of the 2019-2020 Regional 3rd Division League being suspended indefinitely due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, as things stand, the duo will be looking to grab a role again in their near future as South Africa gears up for the level 3 stage of the lockdown. which will shed some positivity on the resumption of football in the country. And more than 6 months after winning the 2019 Rugby World Cup, Springbok prop Trevor Nyakane says it was a hard pill to swallow after he was forced to come back to South Africa from Japan, where the event took place. The 31-year-old had to be replaced by 10-test capped Thomas du Toit after the unfortunate Nyakane tore his right calf in the 23-13 try defeat to the All Blacks in Yokohama. The Springbok continued their Rugby World Cup campaign, which they ultimately won, but without one of the key players. Nyakane admits that even though it was a hard time to leave the team behind, he got back to a great time with his family as he had to spend time with his newborn baby.
It was sad. So yeah, it was sad leaving the guys and having to say your goodbyes and all that, knowing that when you have that belief that the guys can actually do it. But with that being said, you know that you can't. You're still part of it, but you can't be on the field with them. That was the hard pill to swallow. But obviously, on my way back, I was thinking, yeah, it's tough. But I think in my head, I was telling myself, there's someone at home that needs you more than South Africa does at this point in time.
And lastly, the 2020 Comrade Marathon have become the latest major sporting event to be cancelled due to COVID-19. The cancellation followed discussions between the Comrades Marathon Association Board and KwaZulu-Natal Athletics. Athletics South Africa CMA chairperson Cheryl Wynne expressed how it is with profound sadness and regret that the CMA Board, in conjunction with Athletics South Africa and KZN Athletics, had to make this decision. However, Wynne has reassured runners on several practical issues, advising that CMA will deal with the roughly 2,500 foreign and 25,000 South African entries received for the 2020 Comrade Marathon. When it comes to runners who completed their first Comrades Marathon on the 2019 Up Run to Pietermaritzburg, they will qualify for the back-to-back medal upon completion of the 2021 Comrades Marathon Down Run. Meanwhile, in place of the cancellation, all foreign entries will be deferred to Comrades 2021 and or Comrades Marathon 2022, depending upon the athletes' wishes. And in addition, foreign athletes will also have the opportunity to availing their 2020 entry for substitution in 2021 only. That's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow morning with more of your sports. For more updates, do follow us on Twitter at Capricorn FM News. For Capricorn FM Sports, I am Mahlad Samugale Riperil.
Keeping you up to date with the latest sports news. Capricorn FM Sports.
This lesson is proudly brought to you by Kagiso Trust in partnership with the Limpopo Department of Education and Capricorn FM. Kagiso Trust, overcoming poverty.
So 25 minutes heading to 6, Capricorn FM, the pioneers of progress. Hashtag Kagiso Radio Teacher. Catch-up lessons right now. Mr. Magia, focusing on life sciences term 1, DNA code of life, nucleic acids, protein synthesis, and replication. Also, sir, there's a question that came through for you, so I don't know if you want to continue first or take the question.
Okay, let me continue, and then from there.
You'll take the question, no?
Definitely.
All right,
yeah.
Great.
Yeah. No, thank you. Remember, before we went for break, we said I was outlining something with regard to the question from question paper, 2018 question paper. It says, describe the structure of RNA in a cell and the involvement of different types of RNA in protein synthesis. So number one, you need to underline the key concept here with regard to essay type question. Now, let us underline this. Number one, the structure of RNA. And then the other one is the involvement of different types. Just underline different types of RNA and also underline protein synthesis. Now, with the structure of RNA, go back to the structure that we have drawn. You don't have to cram life sciences. You are simply going to outline or to describe what is reflected from your diagram. Number one, you are going to say RNA is single-stranded, then you get a mark. Remember, when you check your diagram, you realize that it's single-stranded. You get a mark for single-stranded, and it's made up of nucleotides. You also get a mark for nucleotides, and then which comprise of ribose sugar. You also get a mark for ribose sugar. Remember, don't just write sugar. Then the other one is phosphate group. You also get a mark for phosphate group. The other one is, it has got nitrogen bases. We said NB standing for nitrogen bases. You also have a mark. Already you've got 5. And then those nitrogen bases are adenine, uracil, guanine, and cytosine. Then the 4 of them, you are going to get 1 mark for that. And then, and when you check from the diagram, you will realize that phosphate group is attached to the ribose sugar. Then you get a mark for that again. And the nitrogen base, again, when you check, is also attached to the ribose sugar. Then you also get a mark. Do you see how simple this question is? And then the other point is that you need to know something with regard to the triplet of bases. Remember, bases on the RNA are arranged in triplets. You get a mark for that. And then as codons on the mRNA, in other words, the triplet of bases of mRNA are codons. And then the triplet of bases of tRNA are anticodons. Here I used to tell my learners that they should use the formula T is equals to T. What do I mean? When we talk of anticodons, when we check anticodons, it has got letter T. And then when we check tRNA, it has got letter T. Then this is how we are going to know this. Sometimes the examiner is going to ask them from the biological concept. To a certain extent, he may end up saying the triplets of bases. Immediately he says the triplet of bases, you underline the key concept, triplet of bases. Then you know that it's either codons or anticodons. And then you check the closing statement. Maybe examiner is going to say triplet of bases of tRNA. Then that you are going to say is anticodons. And then if examiner says the triplet of bases of messenger RNA, then you know that those are codons. And then, but now, the other one with regard to involvement of this RNA in protein synthesis now, you need to know the following. Transcription, although I said it takes place inside the nucleus, but when you define or you describe transcription, you are not supposed to say it takes place inside the nucleus. Those are the questions that you are going to answer, or the answers that you are going to give. Normally when you are answering short questions, here you must tell us about transcription to say the double-stranded DNA unwinds and unzips. You get a mark for unwinding and then another mark for unzips. The hydrogen bonds break. Remember, the 2 strands are held together by the weak hydrogen bond. You get a mark for that. And this is controlled by enzyme. You also get a mark for that. And 1 strand is used as a template. You also get a mark. Remember, with regard to protein synthesis, more especially transcription, although the DNA is going to split into 2 single strands, but only 1 strand here is going to be used as a template. Then we'll check when we'll be discussing DNA replication, because under DNA replication, we are going to have 2 strands that are going to be used as template. But here, it has got only 1 strand is used as a template to form mRNA. And then it is going to use the free RNA nucleotides from the nucleoplasm. Then the mRNA is complementary to the DNA. And then mRNA now has the coded message for protein synthesis. And then with regard to translation, you may simplify it like this. Remember, the mRNA that has been formed from the nucleus is going to move out from the nucleus through the nucleopore and attach itself on the ribosome. And then now, what is going to happen? We've got the tRNA, because remember I told you that we've got 3 types of RNA, then transfer RNA and mRNA. Then this mRNA, like I indicated, is going to move from the nucleus and attach itself on the ribosome. But now, the tRNA that is found in the cytoplasm now is going to pick up amino acids and attach itself on the ribosome. And then this tRNA, remember I said we've got anticodon and codons. I'm sure you remember that anticodons for tRNA and codons for mRNA. Don't forget this. So when the anticodons, that's the other point that we're going to write. When the anticodon on the tRNA matches the codon on the mRNA, then you get a mark for when the anticodon on the tRNA and then matches the codon of on the mRNA, another mark again, then the amino acids become attached. You get another mark for that. And then you must also tell us the type of bond that joins those amino acids, which is the peptide bond. You also get a mark for peptide bond. In other words, you're going to see the amino acids are attached, but the peptide bond to form a required protein. Then you are done with protein synthesis now. Then the other question, it was from 2015 November. It says, describe the process of protein synthesis and the way in which the process would be affected by the gene mutation. Gene mutation, I'll be discussing this under genetics, but just to outline what's happening here. Number one, you are going to explain again the very same process. You may underline the key concept. Describe the process of protein synthesis, you underline protein synthesis, and the way in which this process would be affected by the gene mutation. You also underline gene mutation. And then from there, you are going to repeat the very same statement that I've been discussing, that is transcription, from there, translation. But from there, again, the effects of gene mutation or the effect of mutation. Although I said I'm going to discuss it thoroughly when we'll be discussing genetics, but just to answer this question, what is a mutation? Mutation is a sudden change in the structure of a gene or a chromosome. You'll understand it better when we'll be discussing genetics. But it's a sudden change in the structure of a gene or a chromosome. Then you get a mark for that. Remember, gene, in fact, we have got two types of mutation. That is gene mutation and the chromosomal mutation. Why? Because we said it's a sudden change in the structure of a gene. If it is a change in the structure of a gene, it's going to be gene mutation. If there's a change in the structure of the chromosome, it's going to be chromosomal mutation or chromosomal aberrations. So don't worry, I'll discuss it thoroughly when we'll be discussing this. But these changes, to a certain extent, we're going to say a gene mutation affects the arrangement of the nitrogen bases or the nucleotides. This changes the code on the DNA, which changes the code on the mRNA. Remember, RNA or messenger RNA is formed from the DNA. And then from there, a different amino acid may be coded for, which causes a change in the amino acid sequence and then in the protein, leading to the formation of different protein. Maybe before I continue with the other part, or let me discuss DNA replication, and then from there I'm going to check the question that has been asked. Maybe it's based on the triplet of bases. How do we match the bases? And then let me check something with regard to DNA replication. With DNA replication, you must know that it takes place during interphase. Although you are not supposed to write it under DNA replication as a process per se, but just know that it takes place during interphase. Why? Because examiner may end up saying, describe the process that takes place in the interphase. Then you know that it is DNA replication. Now remember, the DNA, the double helix DNA unwinds, and then the weak hydrogen bonds between the nitrogen bases break, and then the two DNA strands unzip or separate. That is, two single strands are formed. Each strand serves as a template to form a new strand by attaching to free nucleotide from the nucleoplasm to form complementary strands. Remember, in brackets, we are going to write A to T and then C to G. They are complementary. Always A pairs with T and then C with G. And then the other one, each DNA molecule now consists of one original strand and one new strand. And then ultimately the result is two genetically identical DNA molecules. And remember, the entire process is controlled by enzymes. For you to understand this one, number one, because when the DNA replicates, the main objective is to produce the exact copy of itself. So now, what is it that is supposed to be known? For you to understand this, number one, take an example of, I compiled a study guide called Simplified and Mnemonic Device Life Sciences. So inside that guide, I explained something like this. I said, we've got the male, let me say we've got the couple, male and female. This couple, they separate. Obviously, when they separate, they are now singing. We've got two individuals that are singing. Then let me say the male marries the female. Then the other female is going to marry the male. Now we're going to end up having two couples now. and those two couples are made up for male and female, and male and female. The two couples are identical to each other, as well as the original couple, because remember the first our original couple was made of male and female. Now, ultimately, we end up having, remember I said when the DNA replicates, it produces the exact copy of itself. Now, you are going to learn it from that point of view. In other words, if you want to know the whole process of DNA replication, that is the scenario that you can also use. So let me check the question that is going to be, the question that has been asked, because I wanted also to show you how we match the triplet row basis. Then I will request the presenter to give me the question that she has already received.
Okay. I don't know if you can see the question there on your screen. Can you see it there?
Okay, yeah.
So this looks like a learner who was actually studying, and it looks like they are stuck here on 1.4. I think I'm just going to get closer so I can see.
Okay.
What it says exactly. So it says the diagram below shows a part of a DNA molecule, right?
Good.
And then 1.4.1 says provide labels for. A says 1, B says 2, and 3, C says 3. And then what does the next one say? Give the number of the nucleotides.
Nucleotides.
Okay, nucleotides shown in the diagram. And then the third one says give, what's that? Who's moving that? Sorry.
Give one difference.
Between the nitrogenous bases found in DNA molecules and those found in RNA molecules.
Definitely. No, it's a very good question. So in fact, it is based on the whole structure of the DNA. Learners, wherever you are, because this has been derived from 2016, is it November? 2016 November. Question paper 2.
It is.
And it's question 1.4. You may just write it down, and then how do you approach this type of question? Number one, before you answer the whole structure of the DNA, number one, you must make it a point that you write this formula ATCG. A-T and then C-G. That is ATCG. Now, from there you complete the whole table now. If you look at the diagram, down there we've got T. The fact that we've got T, if we use this formula ATCG, what is it that we are supposed to write on the right-hand side? Obviously it's A. Why? Because we said ATCG formula is going to be applied. So now, just above this T, we've got G. Is it G? Yeah, it's G. Then meaning that on the right-hand side now, we are going to write C. Why? Because our formula is ATCG. And then now, how do you know number one? Because number one is also given there. And then on the right-hand side, there's nothing. Then maybe a learner is confused to say, because on the right-hand side, there's nothing just in front of that complements with 1, then you must make it a point that you check the shape of that 1. If you check that shape and you go down there, you are going to see something like, because already down there you wrote T, and then on the right hand side you wrote A. So mean that 1 is A. It's going to be adenine. Why? Because its shape, you now look at the shape. Then from there you start to answer this question now. 1.4.1 provides label for 1. Obviously it's A, which is adenine. And then 2. And then when you check 2, remember I said phosphate, when we talk about the nucleotide, we said PSNB, phosphate, sugar, and nitrogen base. Now, when you check that 2, obviously is the, remember, the other thing that I want you to bring to take into cognizance is to check how to write the correct answer as phosphate or as sugar. Remember, all the nitrogen bases always, they are linked to phosphate. They are linked to sugar. So now I said it's P, S, and B. And when you check NB, it's linked to S, which is sugar. Now, and when you check that 2, it's linked to nitrogen bases. Obviously, that 2 is going to be sugar. But which type of sugar now? Remember, it's the DNA. You must indicate that this is deoxyribose sugar, because if you simply write sugar, we're going to put 0. Why 0? Because under DNA, we have deoxyribose sugar, but under RNA, we've got ribose sugar. And then 3C, which is 3, it is about the bond. When you check that 3, it joins the nitrogen bases. So that is the type of the bond that joins the two amino, that joins the nitrogen bases. That is the weak hydrogen bond. The weak hydrogen bond. And then it says 1.4.2, give the number of nucleotides shown in the diagram. It's very simple. Remember the nucleotide, like I indicated, 7 plus 3 is equal to 10, 9 plus 1 is equal to 10. It goes back again. Remember, when you talk about the nucleotide, is P, S, and B. P, S, and NB is one nucleotide. P, S, and B another nucleotide. P, S, and B another nucleotide. So if you check on the left-hand side, we've got a round-like structure there. Then we also have a shape that is 5-sided, and we also have 1 there. So that the first point is phosphate, the other one is sugar, deoxyribose sugar, and then that one is nitrogen base. Then that's the first nucleotide. Down there we've got the second nucleotide, the third nucleotide, the fourth nucleotide, the fifth nucleotide. Then on the right hand side we also have 5 nucleotides again. So in other words, we've got 10 nucleotides, because it says give the number of nucleotides shown in the diagram. As long as you know that P, S, and B is one nucleotide, P, S, another, remember NB stands for nitrogen bases. It's another nucleotide, and so on and so on. 1.4.3 says give one difference between the nitrogen bases found in the DNA molecules. Give one difference between the nitrogen bases. You underline, in fact, if we want to get total, make it a point that you underline the key concept. Here it says give one difference, underline one difference between the nitrogen bases, underline nitrogen bases, found in the DNA, underline DNA, and those found in the RNA molecules, also underline RNA molecules. Remember, your argument should be based on the nitrogen bases only. Remember, we've got ATCG, under RNA we've got AUCG. So the difference there is uracil under RNA. You are simply going to say RNA has got uracil because they are talking about nitrogen bases. And then DNA has got thiamine, which is one of the nitrogen bases. And thanks very much for that question. So as I'm concluding, I want to guide you with regard to how to approach the triplet of bases, or maybe the triplet of bases, or let me start with the different types of questions that can be coined in the form of biological concept. Examiner may end up saying the base in the DNA molecule, which always pair with adenine. You underline the opening and the closing statement. Now, when they say the base in the DNA, which always pairs with adenine, remember I said ATCG. Adenine meaning that T is for thiamine. Simply say thiamine. The other one is going to say, says the shape of the DNA molecule. Then you must know that DNA is double helix. And don't just write helix. You must write double helix. Why? Because we are supposed to write what is reflected from the exam guideline. Then the other one says the nitrogen bases in the RNA. Immediately say nitrogen bases in the RNA. It's either adenine, uracil, thiamine, adenine, uracil, cytosine, or guanine. So the answer should be from there. But check the closing statement. They say the nitrogen base in the RNA, which is found in the place of thiamine. So obviously that is uracil. The other question is about the triplet of bases of tRNA. You underline the opening statement and also the closing statement. Immediately they say triplet of bases. You know that is either codon or anticodon, but you check the closing statement. The closing statement says of tRNA, then that is the anticodon. The other one, the triplet of bases of mRNA, then which is the codon. And then the other one, maybe examiner says the process in which the DNA makes the identical copy of itself. The process in which the DNA makes the identical copy of itself, then that is DNA replication. This one, what I've been explaining right now. The other one is the part of protein synthesis that takes place in the nucleus. I'm sure you know that is transcription. Or the cell organelles in which translation take place. Then you underline the cell organelle, then also underline translation. Remember I said, when we started with this, I said just write transcription on the right-hand side, write nucleus, and then from there you write translation on the right-hand side, write ribosome. Now, I said you already have answers. The only thing that is left is to check how questions are asked. If now examiner says the cell organelles, number one, you must tell us that is either nucleus or the ribosome. Then you check the closing statement. The opening statement says the cell organelle in which translation takes place. Then obviously that is the ribosome. Or the building blocks or the building units of nucleic acids, then that is the nucleotides. That is the nucleotide. And then from there, the other strategy that we can use now, there are a lot of questions that can be asked based on this part, but I'm just going to give you the approach of dealing with this. If examiner says, identify the molecule in the diagram above, when you look at the molecule or the diagram, as long as it is double-stranded, you know that that's the DNA. Sometimes examiner is going to say, label the parts numbered 1 and 5. Here I just want to clarify some of the things that are the mistakes that are committed by learners. When they say 1 and 5, and you realize that 1 is weak hydrogen bond, 5 is thiamine. Many learners write 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, whereas the question says 1 and 5, not 1 to 5. The other one, examiner can end up saying, what is the collective name of part numbered 2, 3, and 4? So in most instances, learners start to label 2, 3, and 4, which is not correct because the question says the collective name. So these are some of the things that we're supposed to take into cognizance. And then I really would like to appreciate your time. And then next time we're going to meet again. It's like it's going to be on Monday, somewhere there. So good luck for now. Bye-bye.
All right. And there were also a couple of questions that came through that we couldn't really go over. We will touch on those on Monday, hopefully, no?
Yeah, we will forward them to you, and maybe you can just start the lesson with revising that and then moving forward to reproduction, which I'm waiting for. All right, thank you so much.
Maybe just a minute again, and it's very vital. I'm going to repeat it because there's a certain section again, about how to write the triplet basis. I'm going to get them also that. Yeah. All right. And thanks for those questions. Really,
it's a pleasure. So we'll forward the questions to you.
Okay.
Give Mr. Magia. Wow, life sciences, term one.
Sugar, what sugar? I just heard sugar. So do remember that this lesson was brought to you by Kagiso Trust in partnership with the Limpopo Department of Education and Capricorn FM. Kagiso Trust, overcoming poverty.
So we're going to be making way right now.